Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for our third masterclass on Social Security um, with Dillon Cobb and Mike Kothakota. As everybody's getting in the room here, maybe if you want to let us know where you're calling in from. It's always exciting. See who has the most exotic place. I'm in Golden, Colorado. And that chat will be open um, the whole webinar, but and some people may be monitoring it for questions and things. But if you do have questions that you actually want our panel and presenters to address, please make sure to drop those in the Q&A, not the chat. And that might be on your toolbar already. If it's not, if you hit the little three button more um, thing on the right, you'll find Q&A in there. So please hit that. In fact, that gets us to kind of our housekeeping. So as you can see, we're on our third of five sessions on Social Security. Recordings of previous sessions are available, as well as slides. So a couple weeks ago, I did a presentation on the underappreciated risks of Social Security claiming. That was trying to address some of the things that maybe people talk about less in terms of Social Security and you know, survivor, sorry, longevity risk, mortality risk, opportunity cost, all that stuff. So good stuff there. Some of that we'll be returning to next week. And then last week, Mike went over some of the intricacies of taxation of Social Security, which is always a big topic. And then today we're switching to probably the other most complex area of Social Security claiming and strategy, which is spousal and survivor benefits. So we're going to be covering those both for people who are married or divorced. And that's actually where a lot of the intricacies can come in. And today on our panel, we have Mike Kothakota and Dillon Cobb. As people who've been at other sessions here probably know Mike, but Mike is a professor at Columbia and NYU and also runs an RIA called Wolfbridge. Dillon runs Simply Human Advisors, and both have spent a lot of time working with people either in divorce or survivorship situations. And so they bring a lot of experience around, real world cases like this. And so we will certainly cover the intricacies of these benefits, but I also want to make sure we have plenty of time for um, you know, gaining from their wisdom that they've gained over the years in working with people who are in situations of trying to make these decisions when life is also happening to them. So, um, additional housekeeping items. This is available for CFP, CE credit. You have to be on the webinar for 50 minutes or more. AI note takers don't count. And there will be a survey at the end where you can give us your CFP number so that we can make sure that you get your credit. And I already mentioned where to put the Q&A in. We don't always get to, in fact, we never get to all the Q&A. So please do upvote anything that looks interesting to you and that you would like to have answered so that we can try to prioritize those questions and in the time we have at the end. So with that, actually, before we get to sort of my part of the presentation here, maybe we can have Mike and Dillon kind of introduce themselves and a little bit about their practice and kind of what makes this particular topic an area of experience or expertise. So maybe Mike, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So, as Justin said, I mainly work with people going through divorce. In fact, almost my entire, client base is people who are divorced. And that came about just because I started my firm in 2008, and I would just accept anybody who walked in the door, and it happened to be somebody who walked in the door and needed help with divorce. And it turned out that despite I think the idea is that you go to an attorney and they're going to know everything that they need to know, everything that you need to know about divorce. And it turned out that they didn't. So I ended up spending the last 18 years working with clients going through divorce. And so that's kind of my area of specialization.
Yeah, and mine, I'm a CPA and a certified financial planner. I always enjoyed working with single individuals going through a struggle, but it really became acute about 4 years ago when my best friend was killed in a car crash. You don't always want to work with widows who are 39 years old, but it took on a whole new meaning for me after that. And so I began to dive into it. And when I started my practice in 22, that was my primary focus was widows, although I've had a number of divorced and even some couples whose husbands have come in and said, I'm going to die before her anyway, so I might as well go ahead and get started. So that's the short story of my career.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, so let's get into the agenda. As I said, I'll kind of go over some of the basics around this, sort of the what you need to know, the tools, and then we'll talk about some of the interesting planning takeaways and lessons that Mike and Dylan can share with us. So first, we're gonna go over what each of these benefit types are and how they differ. Um, and then we'll key into these particular situations of divorce and death of a spouse, and then some advice on kind of navigating things, helping people with claiming and communication with the Social Security Administration. So some of this is going to be review for many people, but I want to go over it just so we all have the same baseline. So we're going to contrast these spousal and survivor benefits with what I'll talk about typically as your own retirement benefit. The Social Security Administration has different ways of talking about this. They'll often talk about the person as the worker, meaning it's a benefit that's based on your own work history. And as probably most people know, you are eligible for a retirement benefit as early as age 62. This actually wasn't always true, fun historical fact. So early claiming was not available until I think it was the 50s. In the first session of this masterclass, we went over that. It actually was available first for women and then for men. That's back when full retirement age was 65. So all the things we're going to be talking about today with, divorce and remarriage and all these things, none of that's at all relevant to an own benefit, right? That's just a thing you carry with yourself. It's based on your own work history. Um, it's in, as I mentioned, full retirement age used to be age 65. That's the point at which you get this special thing called your primary insurance amount. Today, because of some changes back in 1983, it's pushed out into the 66 range and 67. And actually, very soon, I believe it's in 2027, everyone who has not yet reached it will have a full retirement age of 67. Um, After full retirement age, you get what's called delay credits, meaning if you wait, you get more once you take it. Before full retirement age, you get dinged, you get less benefit. Um, and also before full retirement age, there's going to be relevant to all these types of benefits. If you continue earning income, so if you have wages or self-employment income, you can have an adjustment to your benefit. Crucially, though, no extra benefit after age 70. No one's going to be claiming after 70. It's just not a thing. Spousal benefits. Same ages, except with a few tweaks here. So still eligible at 62. However, because of some changes, which I'll go over in a second, um, you, you cannot get a spousal benefit if your spouse has not actually claimed. I think there may be some slight nuances to that in cases of divorce, but it used to be possible to get a spousal benefit even if your spouse was not actually receiving their own benefit. Not true anymore. So essentially, it's 62 or your spouse's claiming date, whichever is later. Um, this benefit it's actually more complex than you'll hear it talked about, but essentially, if you had no benefit of your own, you'd be eligible for up to half of your spouse's primary insurance amount. So meaning if you took the spousal benefit at full retirement age, you'd get half their primary insurance amount. Um, Spousal benefits are also reduced before full retirement age, but the reductions are actually larger than they would be for your own benefit, at least for the first 3 years before full retirement age. And this is the key difference. There's no delay credits for spousal benefits. So if you wait after your own full retirement age, you're not helping yourself out on spousal benefits. That doesn't mean that everyone will get to take them at their full retirement age. That'll depend on when the spouse is taking it, right? But there's no additional benefit there. Um, and the claiming age of, or the full retirement age of the worker, the person on whose work history this is based, is not relevant in this case, except to the extent that that matters for when you want to claim everything overall. And that's why, making these decisions about when to claim, they're super complicated. They involve how much people's benefits are, what their ages are, how long they're expected to live, all the things that we went over in the last couple of classes. But it's at least good to have these basic facts with you when you're working with clients. As I mentioned, it's no longer possible to kind of split apart a spousal benefit from the benefit of the worker who is on whose work history it's based. So there used to be these things called file and suspend and restricted application. Those do not exist anymore. So what that means is, for example, you can't get a spousal benefit before, again, the worker has actually claimed, and you can't claim a spousal benefit without claiming your own benefit. So that's something called deemed filing. Like if you filed for one, you're filing for both. And that's because of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015. So essentially, the last person who could have done this is now 75. So this is not it's just not a thing anymore. Another thing to understand, and this makes spousal benefits maybe the most complex thing out there, is that pre-full retirement age earnings, again, earned income, so that's wages and self-employment income, the earnings of both spouses matter. To explain why that is complicated, but essentially, you can even find great examples of this if you really delve into the guidance Social Security has for its own workers and in figuring these numbers out. But essentially, they're going to first reduce spousal benefits based on the worker's earnings, and then reduce them based on the receiving spouse's earnings. So again, if you're in a situation where you're considering advising someone to take spousal benefits and own benefits before full retirement age, but they're both still earning a sizable amount of income, these things matter, right? All right. Maybe Mike, I'll let you handle this since I am far from an expert on the kind of where divorce comes in on the spousal side. I don't want to
Yeah.
misspeak.
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, you covered like most of the really complex stuff. The funny thing is, like, we could probably have 100 of these sessions, given all the complexities between like some pensions and like Social Security leveling with like older government employees. So there's all kinds of interesting things that really get complex, and you can spend a ton of time on it. So thanks for doing that. So with divorced folks, it's actually fairly simple. Divorced spouses can claim on their former spouse's Social Security if the marriage has lasted at least 10 years and they're currently unmarried. So that doesn't mean like so some people think that if you get married, that like that's it. You can't ever go back and claim. If you get divorced again, you can't actually go back and claim. So this must be currently married to qualify as a spouse. You don't have to be married to qualify as a spouse now. You can be single. In fact,
Just to make it really clear what you just said, though, Mike.
yeah,
So if you're married for 10 years or more, and then you
yeah,
get divorced, and then you get remarried, you no longer have access to your ex-spouse's
right, while
a
you're married.
spousal benefit based on your ex-spouse. But if you then
Yeah,
get divorced,
yeah.
and let's
If you
say
get divorced, and let's
now
say
you
you're
can go
married for,
back
yeah,
and
good
get,
question. So like
yeah,
say you're married for another 10 years,
hmm,
and then you get divorced.
yeah.
It's the higher benefit, right? You're going to claim on
So
the
you have
spouse that
access
had
to
that.
both. Anybody you were married to for 10 years or more, you have access to
Yeah.
the spousal benefit, but of course you're only going to take the higher one.
Yeah. And if you see down here, multiple ex-spouses can claim, it can get even more interesting, right? So first of all, one thing to consider is a lot of times people will think that, this person is getting half of my Social Security, so like I'm only getting half Social Security. We were only married 10 years. That's not the case. The person with the primary insurance gets their full benefit, right? So they are entitled to their full benefit. Their ex-spouse is entitled to half of it. Now, consider a situation where somebody was married 3 times, 10 years each, to each spouse. Each one of those spouses can claim 50% of that benefit. So what you end up with is a situation where Social Security is paying out 2.5 times, what it had planned on paying out.
Right.
So it can be, and I've actually seen cases where there were two exes claiming on a single person's
However, you cannot
benefit.
double up and get two spousal benefits based on two prior marriages.
You cannot just keep getting married and adding up those benefits. That does not work.
Right.
Um, One thing to note that we didn't put in here that actually just kind of came up yesterday is I have a client who she doesn't have enough credits to qualify for Social Security. She also and subsequently not enough credits to qualify for Medicare. And so people are telling she's 65, and people are telling her you need to go ahead and apply for Medicare. You need to apply for Medicare. There's going to be massive penalties. Um, the penalties aren't that massive, but either way, she is going to be claiming Social Security on her former spouse. So she actually, in this case, it doesn't make, she could claim Social Security now, but it makes more sense for her to wait to claim Social Security, and then she'll apply for Medicare. So just something to consider. There's a little bit of interaction between Medicare and Social Security in that case.
Interesting. Interesting. And this is just a question. I have no idea. Are like administratively, if you're 65 or older and you file for Social Security, would they normally like kick you into Medicare if you're not there or something? Is that like a crucial that you understand like these are, or are they separate? Uh, you know,
So you're supposed to, so you, if you can, so if you're 65 and you file, you're supposed to file for Medicare. If you're
sure.
currently employed, then
And you
there's
can
like
avoid it.
you don't have to start claiming
Right.
it. There are a few other exceptions that like waive the penalty.
Mhm.
That's kind of the main one. But somebody who doesn't have enough credits is actually not eligible for Medicare, so there's no penalties anyway. You become eligible for Medicare as soon as you apply on your partner's Social Security benefits, and then you can start claiming. So it's
Got it.
really kind of an interesting thing.
So that's where they're related.
Yeah, one other thing to think about here is like, so when people are going through the divorce process, a lot of times attorneys will say, I've seen situations where attorneys will use the fact that the the spouse with the benefit, with the primary benefit, is going to receive their full benefit, that they are going to be receiving more money, and that is a marital asset, and that should be considered.
Hmm.
There's no state that I'm aware of that says that's true. If you think about it, there are people who have done calculations on, if you're treating Social Security as an asset, as part of a portfolio. Like there have been some, I think we're even going to talk about that a little bit next week, but essentially, the courts don't care about that. So, but you will often hear this is part of like a negotiation where, hey, you're going to get your full benefit. My client's only going to get half their benefit. You need to give us more assets. So
Got it.
just something to
Got it.
consider.
Interesting. Okay. And then just to double down on second bullet, the 10-year rule only matters if you're divorced. If you're married, spousal benefits work just
Yeah.
as I was going over. So it's not that, oh, you have to be married 10 years before you can get a spousal benefit. So um, I think that's a fair amount of complexity. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. Next one is survivor benefits. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
there's some
no,
of the boring basics here, but if you want to handle this side, Dylan.
yeah, I'll jump in. And I've already seen several good questions. Kevin and Liz, we're going to get to some of those. So I'm going to run through these really quickly. And I think a lot of this is going to answer some of your questions. And here's where you're going to see a lot of divergence between divorce and survivor. So the survivor benefits you can start at age 60, or as you see there, 50 if you're disabled. One thing that I want you to keep in mind is if your client or if somebody is listening, if they have children under the age of 18, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're still eligible for benefits as long as the children are age 18. And then it'll stop. And then once you reach these age milestones, then you can file as a survivor. And here's the big picture on this bullet point number one right here. Here's the big picture thing you need to understand is the Social Security office is looking for the greater of the actual benefit amount. So whatever the spouse who passed away was receiving, or 82.5%, whichever is higher. Um, and now keep in mind, if the spouse has not uh, begun drawing, if the deceased spouse has not begun drawing anything, it will act like a regular PIA. It will grow over time, except there's a couple of things that you're going to have to remember. If you are filing as a survivor, it does not grow beyond your full retirement age. So if my spouse passed away and I didn't claim on hers, my full retirement age, which I guess would be 67, would be the maximum that would grow if I'm filing survivor benefits. Your benefit is still the one that grows beyond that. I think it was Kevin that asked the question, so can I file a survivor and then later claim? The answer is yes. You can later claim on yours. So that whole file and suspend thing that they said, that's kind of what this is you can file a survivor benefit. But these are the things that you want to be careful about because you want to know which one is higher and which one's going to have the maximum long-term benefit. There's a lot of nuance to this.
I think that's
The oh yeah, and
that
that's
one.
what I just said there was there's no extra benefit for delaying on a survivor benefit after full retirement age. So same thing there. You can switch to your own after even if you've been drawing for 6 or 7 years, you can still switch to yours. You can take it if your benefit is higher and it's growing. You can take survivor for 10 years and then start picking up your benefit. You can switch at age 70 if you wanted to. Um,
Yep. Yeah, the actual math is super complicated, but and there's some nuances here. Again, there actually is this other thing called survivor full retirement age. Very soon, it's all going to be the same. So, but for now, there can be like slight differences. Basically, survivor retirement age is always at or earlier than your own retirement age. So, that's one way to think about it. But yeah, this is, as Dylan said, this is basically the last place that you can do this kind of dance between benefit types. Yeah.
yep. You, um, this is one that impacts Michael and me both. I actually have a client who was uh, married to her first husband for 10 years, uh, more than 10 years. She was married a second time. He passed away. She was married again before age 60 and divorced. And at age 60, she was divorced before age 60. Um, at age 60, she was able to file for survivor benefits. And it was like what Michael said earlier. Now, survivor benefits is going to be a little bit different than divorce benefits. So, this one here, if you're married before 60, it does disqualify you if you are if you are still married. In this case, she had divorced before 60, so her qualification picked up again. She was able to get spousal benefits at age 60. And here's the interesting thing, and there's a slide we're going to touch on here in just a minute, that you have to stay on top of the Social Security office. When she called, they disagreed with her. She kept being persistent until they finally agreed with her that she is not married. She qualifies for the spousal benefit. Um, and I think one of the questions uh, was is addressed by this fourth bullet point. Sorry, the third bullet point there. If you get remarried after age 60, you still qualify for the spousal, sorry, even I get the language confused, the
Survivor.
survivor benefit. So you can be married and still qualify for survivor benefits on your previously deceased spouse benefit.
So a bunch of complexity here, but just on the terminology part, the Social Security Administration calls this survivor benefits. No one calls themselves a survivor. They might be called a widow or widower, right? Is that's even just like a little bit of terminology to use and make sure you're using with the office, right? Um, and then this 10-year rule, right? Sounds very familiar from the spousal situation. And it looks like it's basically it's in parallel, right? So um, if you were married and then divorced, well, in order to be eligible for survivor benefit, you have to have been married at least 10 years. But if you're married at the time of death, there's no 10-year rule, right? Just like with spousal. You don't have to be married for 10 years in order to access spousal benefits. You don't have to be married for 10 years in order to access survivor benefits as long as you're, either married or you were married at the time of death. So that might be a good way to kind of think about it to control. I mean, because some of this is incredibly complicated. The age 60 thing is, I mean, I think to a lot of us that just rings, okay, what? That's bizarre. I mean, 60 because that's the earliest you could claim survivor benefits. Um, but just to be really clear on this, if you are married to someone who is not the deceased when you turn 60, you cannot access survivor benefits from that previous spouse. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Good. Good stuff. All right. So to summarize some, I probably didn't get everything, but all right. So we got these three types of benefits, what they're based on, right? So whose work history they're based on. The earnings adjustments. We didn't cover earnings adjustments for survivors. That does still apply to survivor benefits. Just swap out, it's actually only going to be the survivor's earnings for kind of obvious reasons, because the deceased won't be earning anything. And it's the survivor full retirement age that matters there. But there are still those earnings adjustments that can apply. We see the difference in earliest claim age. So survivor benefits, the one that you can claim a little bit earlier, or age 50, as Dillon mentioned. Just on the kids 18 or younger, that's a different benefit amount in that case? Is that right? Or yeah.
It, it's actually you're going to be able to draw benefits. Like I said, as long as the kids are age 18, it's really based on the per kid.
Oh, it's
But they're going to get a set benefit for each of them as long as they are under 18. Once they become 18, that does stop.
okay. So that's a slightly different kind of benefit, and it is per kid. All of these are reduced before full retirement age, and they all have their own reduction schedule. So they're all different. Survivor reductions are different from spousal reductions, which are different from own benefit reductions. And own benefit is the only one that has delay credits, um, which is, I mean, that's basically the reason that this switching strategy can be useful, right? I mean, well, I guess I think maybe the next, we're gonna go over a bunch of these. So we'll return to the switching strategy in a second here. So that's a quick summary of all the complexity there. So let's extract some of the planning points and we can discuss, some of the situations where these have come up. So as I mentioned, in 2027, full retirement age will all be at 67. So all the people who had earlier pre-retirement ages will have full retirement ages will have already reached them. Um, and as we've said, all else being equal, postponing spousal or survivor benefits after you've reached full retirement age doesn't um, pay off. I say all else being equal because for uh, spousal benefits, you may still be looking at the person's own benefit will increase if they push past their own full retirement age. So the difference in age can matter a lot here. Uh, and the survivor benefit amount will matter based on the deceased's full retirement age and when they claimed. Survivor benefits are the only one of these where the actual benefit amount is part of the calculation for the other person. The Social Security Administration calls these auxiliary benefits, so like benefits based on somebody else. And I know, Dillon, we're going to talk about some situations there, which actually maybe this is a good time to talk about that. So, how would someone think about, claiming their own benefit if, for whatever reason, they can foresee, like you mentioned, a client who was wanting to think about this already?
Yeah, you and I talked about this last week where there are instances where um, someone might be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and one of the first things that if this is a rare case, but imagine a scenario where they're 62 or 63 and they want to go ahead and start taking their benefit. They're married. Um, I think I would just cautious on that or caution on that because what that's going to do is it is going to uh, that does dictate what the survivor is going to get if they were already taking the benefits. It does become part of the calculation in effect. It doesn't automatically mean their benefit is going to be reduced, but it does become part of the calculation. So it's whatever they were taking or that 82 point whatever percent, whichever one is higher, and both of those are going to be reduced. So that the caution there is if your instinct is to just go ahead, well, let's just go ahead and take it. Um, we need the income. Well, is there another way to do that? Maybe it's taking it on hers, or I would just look at all options before you just jump in there and take it.
Yeah, I think there can be, and we'll talk about this next week when we're talking about the psychology of claiming decisions. It would probably feel even more so in the situation you're talking about, right? Imagine you're 62, 63, you have a terminal diagnosis, and you think, well, shoot, I'm not going to make it to full retirement age. I'd sure like to get some of my benefit, right? I've been paying in for 40 years or whatever it is, right? And that's very normal for people to feel that way. And it might even be an okay decision, but um, in that particular situation, if you took, let's say you took at 62, right, and you have 5 years before full retirement age and you're reducing your actual benefit far below your primary insurance amount. Primary insurance amount is the amount you receive if you waited until for full retirement age. Well, by doing that, your spouse will only be able to take into account your benefit amount, the actual check you're getting, or 82.5% of your full retirement, the PIA. And the reason there's that 82.5 is basically, I think I have on here what it's called if you're ever looking to refer to it, the retirement insurance benefit limitation. So it's basically they're saying, hey, if your spouse took early, this is the most that can hurt you, right? So it's saying, hey, 17.5% is the most that will ding you because your spouse took early. But 17.5%, that's a lot. So if you didn't claim and you passed away tomorrow, your spouse would be getting to base their survivor benefit on 100% of your PIA instead of 82.5% of it. So it's just, like you say, Dylan, it's just worth looking at the different options. It doesn't necessarily mean claiming would be a bad idea, but it's definitely a place for caution. That definitely makes sense. Um, all right, a couple other takeaways here. We did mention for spousal benefits, earnings are a particular issue because you can get dinged on both of them. And the survivor benefit switch is probably let me see if I have other, yeah, these are the last planning points here. So maybe we'll spend a little bit of time on the switch, and maybe, I don't know, Dillon, if you have some examples you can think of where people have done this, and kind of walk us through how that might work and why it can be helpful.
Yeah, and a specific example is the client that I mentioned earlier, where she was married multiple times, and she actually took the survivor benefit as early as, and she's also working. And so she took the survivor benefit knowing that it was going to be reduced by her earnings, and she was willing to do that. Um, and the survivor benefit, just like others, is reduced if you are working. It's a formula, but um, he died early, so she could go ahead and start taking at age 60. I think there was a question: did he have to did he have to begin taking it before she could take it early? No, she was age 60. He had never gotten to the age at which he could take. She started taking on his benefit. She was willing to take the reduction because she knew she had a working benefit. And we're going to delay that as long as possible. And our hope is to delay it to age 70. There's not really any reason why we shouldn't, because her record is going to continue to grow until the maximum age 70 for her. So at that point, we will switch to her record. And Justin, I think there's a slide later where we will talk about. I think there's a switching slide, but
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess this was it. Um, and the um, there's another slide later where we talk about the language.
There we go.
I think I want to stop here because I do think this one needs to be emphasized. Um, Using the words matters. The difference, and I even said it earlier, I mixed up spousal and survivor. I do that a lot. Saying I'm a divorced spouse or divorced survivor. Generally speaking, you can go with sorry, uh, divorced spouse versus spousal versus survivor. If you use that language with the Social Security staff, it's usually going to give them some information that even the client is not aware that they're not even saying. And if the client goes in there without all the tools and doesn't use the appropriate language, I have seen the Social Security staff not really probe with additional questions, and um, and I've been in the meeting with them. And if I didn't volunteer, here's what we're looking for, the staff wouldn't have gotten it just right. And I started joining these meetings because I've had a number of people not get it right, and they come back to me, and I've realized, well, I was expecting it to be this dollar amount. Why didn't it jump up to here? And come to find out, they were spousal, or they were on their own benefit when they intended to be a survivor benefit. And so the local offices, I would generally recommend, if you can, go into the office. Not all of them are easy to get into. So I recognize that. But if you can talk face to face, it's a little bit easier. But using the appropriate language does make a difference.
Very good. Very good advice there. So just to wrap up the switching, this is essentially, if those of you were familiar with the file and suspend, it's a lot like that, because that situation Dillon just went over, right? Where you're taking survivor benefit but letting your own accrue. That is still a place where this is possible. No other place where that's possible. In the rare case where you've already taken your own benefit and then suspended it, you can do that. You can suspend your own, take survivor, and your own benefit will then accrue delay credits. Now, you're kind of you don't get to like reset it. You know, it's not a full mulligan. So you still kind of hurt yourself on taking early, but you do get the delay credits after full retirement age. So that I think wraps that one up. Um,
Yeah.
let's
And Justin, I
oh,
think this slide was what I mentioned earlier, where I have a client who actually does qualify for spousal benefits, survivor benefit, and her own benefit. She's one of the rare
right.
ones where the Social Security office mixed them up because they did acknowledge she does qualify for one of three options. And they gave her a spousal benefit when she wanted the survivor benefit. And the difference there is spousal benefit was 50% of the ex-spouse. The survivor benefit was 100% of his PIA. So if they were perfectly comparable, it's you're choosing 50% versus 100%.
Right.
And so she was getting the spousal benefit. It should have been more, should have been the survivor benefit. So that's where the language matters.
Yeah. And it is so easy. I mean, they both start with S. Come on. You're not making it easy on us here. So, okay. Mike, let's go back to spousal and divorce situations. I know this you became an accidental expert in this. So,
Yeah, so I'm also a scientific researcher. So in my area was divorce simply for a variety of reasons. One, it's a little bit, if you know the subject, it's a little bit easier to study it. Um, but a study I did with, we looked at simulations around, what like the best way to allow somebody to live well post-divorce, particularly somebody who has is a lower wage earner. We call them a lower wage earning spouse, sometimes dependent spouse. Um, but essentially, uh, looking at things like alimony, turns out Social Security provides is a very strong driver of success, long-term financial success. So this benefit that the government provides is actually very beneficial to divorced spouses. That and asset level tend to be the primary drivers of long-term success. Um, and then a couple of studies I did with uh, Dr. Jessica Weary, we looked at like what people think, so kind of attitudes about stuff. And what's interesting, a lot of the younger generations don't think spouses should be able to claim Social Security on their ex-spouse's record. Um, so these are things that you might get into when you're having conversations with clients, like their attitudes. Now, there is some evidence that some of these attitudes are changing as these people get older, they start to have families, their priorities start to shift. But in general, there appears to be this bifurcation of older generations, younger generations, and how they think about things like spousal support, um, benefits that are provided by the government. A lot of those younger generations, both men and women, think that people should be able to support themselves. So quite interesting. And then this other thing that I thought was, that I thought was pretty interesting, just in my dissertation came across just some data. Most people don't know that they can claim on their ex-spouse's Social Security. Most divorced spouses don't. And anecdotally, some attorneys don't. So this sort of knowledge is incredibly important for financial planners. There's a lot of really cool stuff when you start digging into the divorce research that's just not really that is not relevant for today. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them offline.
all right. Well, we have lots of questions. So,
Yep.
um, let's see if we can dive into some of them. So again, if you see any that you really want answered, please hit the thumbs up that upvotes it and we can see that. So I'll try to hit those first. And, some of these could be quick. We'll see. Um, All right, remarriage after 60. Can you confirm that remarriage does not disqualify someone from survivor benefits from a prior deceased spouse? I believe we did confirm that, but Dylan, just
That
yep,
is correct.
that is
Yeah.
correct.
And
So,
and the remarriage before 60, we did answer that too. The exception is if they're not married, if they divorced, for example, that
yep.
is an exception.
Um, Claiming survivor benefit before your own full retirement age, my understanding is it's permanently reduced. That is correct. Yes. This will be great. We'll just say that is correct over and over. Um, all right. Do you see any? Oh, there's one with 4 upvotes. Let's do that. Let's see. Okay. Married couple. If one spouse claims Social Security at 62, can she switch to their spouse if it's higher? So I think this is talking about spousal benefits,
Yeah.
um, which uh, if you're already eligible for spousal benefits and you claim, you will get spousal benefits. There's just, you can't not take them. It's called deemed filing. Um, Typically, I think what we're talking about is a situation where maybe the other spouse hasn't yet claimed. And so when that spouse claims, you would get your spousal benefit. Um, I'd have to, I know somebody said it's automatic. It may be possible to defer it still if that's advantageous to you. I don't think most people would. And
I,
typically that would often be maybe you're already at FRA, so there's no point in delaying it.
I
Uh,
think, Justin, this is one of the loopholes that was closed a few years ago. That what I think what the question is can we effectively file and suspend
okay.
one spouse and file on the other spouse? And I just don't believe that to be true anymore. It's that's one of the nuances that people are taking advantage of and they can't do anymore.
Right.
Does that make
There is
sense?
no way to get only your spousal benefit without your own, and there's no way to get a spousal benefit without your spouse, the worker, having claimed. So yeah, both those things are no longer possible since that 2015 bill, which I forget what exactly the dates when it became effective are, but as I said, the youngest people who ever could have done that are now 75. So uh, it's long in the rearview mirror. All right. Feel free to jump in, guys, if you're able to scan these quicker than I am. But maybe some distinguishing between, kids and spouses, surviving spouses. Dylan, are there benefits that actually minor children themselves receive? Is that what you were talking about earlier?
All right. The question was a little bit confusing. You're looking at the anonymous
Yeah.
attendee, is that?
Yep. With 3 upvotes, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure I totally get it either, but um, well, maybe I'll look for some others that are easier.
There's this
Um,
one that's pretty easy. Like if you apply for divorce spousal benefit, is your ex-spouse notified? I did answer that like to somebody else, but it seems to be an important question. No, it's confidential. Doesn't reduce their benefit. There's
no reason for them to
no
know.
reason.
Yeah.
Somebody asked because for alimony purposes, so like alimony reduction purposes. So the
Mm.
idea being that if you're paying alimony and then your spouse starts claiming on your Social Security, um, typically in most cases don't go to trial. So typically most people would plan on that, right? So it would be built into the separation agreement. Um, Obviously some states are different, and if there was a court order, that could change things. If the lawyers didn't know what they were doing, that could change things. So, but in general, they're not notified.
Here's another easy one. If husband dies after claiming at 70, would the widow receive his age 70 benefit or only his full retirement age benefit, the 70 benefit? So that's just one of the things about survivor benefits is they take a look at the actual benefit amount as opposed to just PIA. All the other benefits are based on this thing called PIA, primary insurance amount, which is your benefit if you took at full retirement age. But survivor benefit, you get to look at both. You look at PIA and their own benefit, and then you apply these reductions and things and see where it is. Now that assumes that the surviving spouse, the widow, is taking survivor benefit at their survivor full retirement age or later. If they were taking at 60, it could be reduced. Yeah. All right.
There's a question up there from Terry that I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but let me see if I can state this very clearly. If you were divorced and that previous spouse dies, I don't know if this is what you were asking, but you don't get to claim survivor benefits if you were previously divorced. You're only a survivor if you were married when they die. And so that question was a little bit ambiguous. What about the divorced spouse benefit when the primary dies? But at least I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, but I wanted to be clear on that. If you are divorced and unmarried, you don't get to claim survivor benefits. However, if there was a previous spouse somewhere prior to that who died while you were married to them, you would get to claim spousal benefits.
Okay. The question about paying back, I don't know the answer to that. Somebody was asking, hey, kind of have like, whoops, I forgot to take it at 70. I don't know. Maybe one of you guys knows if there's sort of a payback. Certainly the benefit wouldn't be any higher if you wait till after 70.
Yeah, I'm seeing up to 6 months. They'll do a back pay for up to 6 months. And
Okay.
I just had a client after age. I had a client who was 71, a new client who's 71, and all they could get back was 6 months. So they missed 6 months worth of pay.
Interesting. Yeah, I know there are a lot of those kind of true ups, and actually there are even paybacks that can happen, particularly with those earnings reductions, because the Social Security Administration does try to get it right the first time, but once they see how much you earned, they may go back and say, "Whoops, we paid you too much. Give us our money back." So there's all sorts of true ups and paybacks that can happen in practice that, you're certainly not going to see those cash flows exactly right in your, financial planning software, for example. But okay, that's great information.
And to Janet's question, this is where I would continue to encourage everybody to keep asking questions. If you keep getting the same answer over and over again, that's probably the answer. But if you got an answer once and you are not satisfied, don't hesitate to make another appointment and ask somebody else. The least they can do is say, yep, that's right. But it's worth asking again.
You'd be surprised how often the people you ask the first time don't have the answer.
Yeah.
And so continuing to call back
I mean,
is a good idea.
this stuff is super complicated. There are these guidance documents from Social Security. If you read through them, I mean, they will make your head spin. They are absolutely nuts. And that's what the workers are basing it on. So it's not that necessarily they're, have any ill intent or anything. It's just very complicated. And so, um, yeah. And actually, there's a question somewhat related to this, which is sort of, well, how do I know? Like, say you're taking a survivor benefit, how would I know what my own benefit would be if I did claim? Is that doesn't this person saying, Patrick is saying, doesn't appear anywhere on any statements or anything? I'm assuming you just have to call or go in, right?
Yeah, you typically, and so I think somebody asked a similar question about divorce, like how would you know what your benefit is? Like
Yeah.
You can estimate it to some degree depending on like when the last time you saw a Social Security statement was, but
Yeah.
if like maybe you have a spouse who earns above the max, right? And then you could kind of back into a calculation. I mean, I've done that. It's never right, ever. So I'm pretty good at arithmetic, so I'll assume that it would be right, but for some reason it never is.
Yeah. Okay. And a couple other
I
quick
see a
ones.
question in here that I
Oh,
don't know, Justin. Does
okay.
suicide impact the survivor benefits? I
I
have
think
no
the answer is
idea.
no.
I don't think so. No, it's
Yeah.
not life insurance. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it's a good question. Um, did see one. Okay, so reduction in survivor benefit for claiming before your FRA. Again, the FRA that's relevant here, full retirement age, is not necessarily the same as your own. So it could be before, usually only by a few months, but it kind of like how full retirement age gets later, the later you were born because of the 1983 changes, and that will cap out at 67 soon, in 2 years. Spousal or survivor full retirement age, see, so easy to say the wrong word, is the same. And the reduction amounts are slightly different. They're not these weird, 25, 36th of 1% things. They're these decimal amounts. But it's basically the same thing. You say, how long before FRA am I? If I'm 10 months early, it's 10 times my reduction amount, and that's what gets applied to what I would have gotten if I were at my full retirement age. So it's a very similar concept to own benefits or spousal benefits. There was a question or some comments actually here. This would be a good one. I don't think we went over this. Well, I did say as long as you're married when they pass away, but apparently somebody is saying I may have misspoken. Maybe you do need to be married. Is that what somebody's saying? You have to have been married for a year to qualify for widower benefits. I don't know if Dillon, if you know that.
No, I there is you. I think you have to be married for, yeah, somebody says 9 months. I thought it was 6 months. I could be wrong about that. I don't
Seen
think
a
it's a
lot of nine
year.
months in here. So,
Yeah.
obviously this is not necessarily the sort of situation that you run into every day. So, yeah, definitely. Sounds like it's 9 months. So sorry if we can add that to the slides. We'll find out the real number and add it to the slides. So, yeah, and I think one other thing that's coming up here is just to get some of this really complex information. Um, you you do have to call, dealing with Social Security, getting through to somebody, getting an appointment. These things can be, just they can be headaches, right? And it sounds like Dillon and Mike, you've one piece of value you can add for clients is helping them navigate that, and that could be extremely valuable. I mean, literally extremely valuable in terms of the benefit amount, but also just it is hard to navigate these things. It's bureaucracy and it's complicated, as I think we've seen today. So that's one of my takeaways is if you've got the chops, that can be a big help. Any others that I know we got a ton, which this always happens, but are there any others that are really jumping out as
Oh, I've been looking over the questions. Looks like there's people putting stuff in the chat. So, um,
yeah, I mean, there's a ton. It'd be hard to necessarily read these. I have a couple questions about Income Lab. So obviously, this is an Income Lab webinar. So we do cover all these amounts or all these benefit types, and the place where you can see the details of that would be in the Social Security Decision Lab. That's where you would see them broken down by type. So own benefit, survivor benefit, spousal benefit, and things like that. If you're just in the general, so I can show you what it looks like. We try not to make our graphs, too complicated. So for example, here I have a situation where we've got two different Social Securities. We've got some, wages, and you can see all these, reduced benefits and things. That's every benefit all glommed together for each person. In this case, I believe Mary has spousal and own benefits. But if you wanted to get the detailed view, you'd want to go to Decision Lab and then go to Social Security, and then you can start looking at uh, all the details of all the different claiming options and where the different benefits, how they get split out. So if you go to scenario details, that's where you can see all the details. So it is 1 o'clock, and I know people are hoping to give us their CFP numbers, so we'll stop there. I want to thank Mike Kothakota and Dillon Cobb. Great session, lots of complex stuff. So really appreciate your expertise, and thank you everybody for joining us. Please come back next week when we'll have a panel on the psychological aspects of claiming Social Security. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.